Aqara just released the best-in-class smart lock that works across ecosystems. It supports multiple users. It has the latest in proximity unlocking, a fingerprint reader, access codes, as well as a ton of other features. But my only problem, I didn't even know that I needed it. But then my existing smart lock broke. My old lock would not communicate with Apple Home or even its own first-party app. From changing the batteries to repairing it, nothing would get the lock back online. Now, as a husband, as a dad, as a new dog owner, I could not just go back to a conventional lock because the conveniences are just way too great. Now, I researched what was the best smart lock on the market, and Aqara's U400 kept coming up at the top of that list. Now, just to be clear, the video is not sponsored by Aqara, which means that the $269 price tag for the U400 is all the more real, and that the features and the lock had to deliver. But would it? Now, the lock itself is available in 3 different finishes. There's black, there's silver, and there's satin nickel, and I could not find satin nickel anywhere, even though Apple listed it for sale on their online store. So I bought everything that I have from Amazon itself, and all those links will be down in the video description. Again, this is not sponsored by Aqara. Now, inside the box, you're getting the lock assembly itself, 1 rechargeable battery, 2 keys, the accessory kit, the bolt and screw kit, the mounting plate, the installation manual, and the user manual. Now, my previous lock from Schlage integrated directly into HomeKit without the need for an additional hub, which is one of the reasons why I chose the U400, because it does the same exact thing. You can connect the U400 using Matter over Threads directly to HomeKit without the need for a home hub, as long as you have a HomePod Mini 2 or an Apple TV 4K, which I have both those products. Now, I did choose to pick up Aqara's additional hub, which is the M200, to test out some additional features, and I'm going to go into that in a few minutes here so you can understand what the difference between those two and when you might actually want to pick that up. Now, I am not a locksmith by any means, but I really would consider myself pretty handy, even though my wife might say differently. And since this was a replacement and not a retrofit like an August lock, it was a very straightforward process. First, I removed the cover from the door, disconnected the panel from the power. I had a little bit of trouble getting the tumbler or the cylinder lock thingy from the old lock, and then inserted the new lock. If I wasn't recording, it probably would have taken me 12 or 15 minutes instead of 20, which it did take me because I was recording at different angles. I just want to give you a quick tip here that this right here is the antenna for ultra wideband, and that yellow here, that's the controller for the lock to disengage or engage. You want to make sure that both of these are seated correctly, otherwise ultra wideband won't work or your lock might not communicate properly when it needs to be unlocked. Now, the lock is installed, and the next thing you have to do is make sure that the battery is going to be charged. And I was pleasantly surprised after owning the Schlage lock, which I probably change the battery at least once a month or once every 2 months, that the battery itself is rechargeable for the U400, and it's actually rechargeable through the housing. So really what all you need to do is have a battery bank with a retractable cord like this Anchor one that I have here, and connect it to the lock and it'll charge overnight. It's not fast charging by any means, but it's not something where you need to have it charging fast or charging quickly. Once you've paired the lock with HomeKit, you're automatically prompted to add your home key to the iPhone, and if you have an Apple Watch that supports it. And you also set up your passcode to unlock the door in case you don't have your iPhone or home key isn't working for whatever reason. Let's start with the most basic way to get into your house, because the U400 ships with 2 traditional keys that are keyed for your lock specifically. If you need more, you can go to the hardware store, cut duplicates so you're never without a backup. Let's talk about the fingerprint reader, because this is actually one of my favorite things about this lock that I did not even expect. The U400 stores up to 50 fingerprints in total. It unlocks in 1/3 of a second or 0.3 seconds, and it has a 98.6% accuracy rating according to Aqara. I can tell you that it just works quick. My son does not have an iPhone, so I set him up with his own fingerprint and his access code. And the whole process probably took about 1 or 2 minutes. But the hardest part for him was making sure that he was lifting up his finger and getting a clean read. You know, that first time that you do it, you're not used to it. Well, he was having that same trouble just like adults do. But it does work. And I can tell you that I actually got locked out of my own house while I was with Miles. I didn't have my phone for some reason. I didn't have my watch. And I didn't remember my access code. And Miles was able to let me in with his fingerprint. So it does work. Just don't be like me. Next up is tap to unlock using Home Key and Apple Wallet. Now, this uses NFC instead of UWB, and there are 2 good reasons that you want to use NFC as a backup, or maybe even as your primary, depending on what your exact scenario is. First, NFC has a simpler hardware requirement. It works passively and has a lower battery consumption, and it has an absolute physical security advantage since you actually have to touch the lock to trigger it with the card itself. Now, if you want to use it on your phone, just double-click the side button on the iPhone or your Apple Watch, hold it near the lock, and you are in. It actually works with third-party NFC cards, including Aqara's own, which is $10. And it is device agnostic, meaning that you can use it with an Android device as long as you have a compatible hub to bridge between Android Home or Google Home and Apple Home. Next is where the magic happens. The U400 supports hands-free unlock using ultra wideband, and if you've never experienced it, it is really hard to describe it without sounding dramatic. Essentially what you do is you walk up to the door and it unlocks. It's that simple. The phone stays in your pocket and you never even break stride. Ultra wideband is a short-range radio technology built into the iPhone 11 and newer, as well as the Apple Watch Series 6 and newer. And it gives the lock centimeter level precision control exactly on where you are and what direction you're approaching from. So the lock knows the difference between you walking in front of it and you walking past it from your living room. There's also a UWB indicator light on the lock itself. When it's green, UWB proximity detection is active and the lock will unlock when you are near it. When it's yellow, it's actually telling you the same exact thing. It's just letting you know that the battery is low, and if the battery gets below 8%, UWB will not work, so you don't want to be in that predicament. Now, in real life, why does this even matter? Well, if you're walking with your dog, pulling in groceries, you're coming in with your hands full, you're holding an umbrella, there's a number of different scenarios where you just can't maybe get to your keys, get to your phone, use your fingers to unlock the device, and the device will unlock automatically. It's dead simple. It just works like magic. And this is not just a spec on the box. It is something that you feel and use every single day. And if you want to fine tune the unlock distance or approach angle that you could do it directly in the Home app or even Aqara's first party app. Next, let's talk about Aqara's M200 hub, because for $70, what does it unlock? See what I did there? Well, depending on what your exact home setup is, could be something, could be nothing. First, the M200 functions as a bridge between Apple Home and the lock itself if you do not have a HomePod Mini 2 or an Apple TV 4K Gen 2. Now, maybe you're like me and you already have a HomePod Mini 2 or an Apple TV 4K. Do you even still need it? Well, for most people, you do not need the hub, and it doesn't really add any net new functionality to the U400 unless you have either a Zigbee or a Matter automation that you want to connect to the lock. For the scope of this video, I'm not going to be using it, but I will be adding it to my larger home network video where we're swapping out Eero for Ubiquiti, so get subscribed if you want to see that. All right, let's talk about what it's like to live with this lock after 2 weeks of daily use, because the fine print is what you get long after the return policy is up. First and foremost, it is the price tag. $269 is real money, and that's the first objection that most people are going to have to spending on this lock. Now, it's completely valid because it is a lot of money. I'm going to circle back to this in just a minute here once we talk to the rest of the items. Second, it's the auto lock behavior. If you've had the lock for a few weeks and the battery is dying sooner than expected, you need to check this out. Apple Home allows you to configure the lock to automatically lock after 2 minutes, but whenever I went outside or whenever I came back in, the lock would actually lock almost immediately within like 5 or 6 seconds, it felt like. Now, this was a little confusing at first, but after troubleshooting, I found that the lock itself in the Aqara app has its own auto lock configuration, and the last one will never be used. So practically speaking, what this means is that even though Apple Home was configured for a 2-minute auto lock period, that the Aqara app was overwriting this because it never even looks at the 2-minute policy that's being set by Apple Home. So it could be confusing. You need to disable one or change the timing on one or the other if you want it to work correctly. And because hands-free unlock triggers every single time, that's where the battery drain is coming from. So more unlocks than you expect, and that means the battery does not last as long. Third, unlock on approach or tap to unlock. It can be a little bit confusing when you're doing this for the first few times, but you don't know if you need to take your phone out of your pocket or you're going to use your watch or bring it close to another. So you can actually configure which locking method is either enabled or disabled right inside of your home key. So if you go to Wallet, click on your home key and click on the inspector button in the top right-hand corner, you can disable or enable either one of those features. So tap to unlock or unlock on approach. And it needs to be done on every individual's home key. So if you do it once for your phone and for your Apple Watch, you would need to do it for anybody else that has access to a home key. Now, who should not buy the Aqara U400? Well, I think you're going to give it pause if you have double doors like I do and you care about a matching set, because you might want to look elsewhere. Aqara does not sell a handlebar set for this, so if you need to buy them separately, they're about $45 or $50 a piece. You don't need to buy Aqara's, you can buy any one, but then you still have the second doors kind of dummy lock, as they call it. Just be prepared if you're going to want to buy this, you will need to spend more money if this thing bothers you, depending on how much you care about the aesthetics. And if you're looking for something more elegant, this is not it. It's clearly a tech product that's sitting on your door. It's not a deal breaker for most people, but it might be for some. But in terms of the cost, I think for the verdict, unlock on approach is absolutely, it feels like the future when you are using this lock. And that alone is a meaningful daily experience change. Not one that just lives on a spec sheet, but one that you feel each and every day. That and the rechargeable battery is a genuine plus that feels like it's gonna last a lot longer than my Schlage Sense, because after a few weeks worth of daily use, puppy potty breaks, daily life, soccer life, all of that, I've used about 18% worth of battery life, and that's before I changed the auto lock policy that I just talked about a moment ago. I think that's pretty solid. And the fact that the lock supports matter over threads, meaning that you are not locked in the ecosystem if you ever moved away from Apple or Google, went to Samsung, or one of your family members became a member of the green bubble group. The lock is flexible and future-proofing is real. So bringing it back to the cost, is it worth $269? Well, if you're using something several times a day and it's used by multiple people in your family, your cost per day is it's much less. And I think that that kind of daily use of a product is well worth it, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. Make sure you get subscribed for that Ubiquiti video. My name is Mike, and guys, I will talk to you in the next one.